I used to believe that trust was one of my greatest strengths. I wasn't the jealous type. I wasn't controlling. I didn't believe in checking phones, asking for passwords, or questioning every movement. To me, love was about freedom, about choosing someone every day without fear, about believing that if someone wanted to be with you, they would be. Without games, without secrets. When I met her, she came into my life with a history already written. Friends she had known for years. Stories from before me. People who knew her in ways I was still learning. And right at the center of that world was her best friend. From the very beginning, her best friend was present. Not in a threatening way, not in an intrusive way, just there. Always there. She knew everything about her. Her fears, her past relationships, her insecurities, the things that made her laugh, the things that made her cry. And I liked her. That's important to say, because a lot of people assume betrayal starts with suspicion. It doesn't. Sometimes it starts with comfort. Her best friend was easy to trust. She was warm, attentive, supportive. She smiled when we were together. She encouraged our relationship. She made comments about how good we were for each other. She felt like an ally, not a rival. I remember thinking how lucky my girlfriend was to have someone like that in her life. Someone loyal, someone constant, someone who would always protect her. I never once questioned their closeness. They talked constantly, texted throughout the day, called each other late at night, met for coffee, went on walks, shared private jokes I didn't always understand. But I didn't feel threatened. I told myself that's what best friends do. Especially women. Especially close ones. And I wanted to be the kind of man who trusted, the kind of man who didn't project insecurity onto innocent friendships, the kind of man who didn't make his partner feel trapped. So I opened the door completely. I welcomed a best friend into our relationship, not physically, but emotionally. I let her opinions matter. I listened when she gave advice. I didn't mind when my girlfriend went to her first instead of me sometimes. I told myself it was healthy, that no one person should be someone's entire emotional world. Looking back now, that belief feels painfully ironic, because what I didn't understand then was that there's a difference between support and replacement, between friendship and emotional dependence, between closeness and crossing a line. But at the time, I saw none of that. I trusted her best friend the same way I trusted her, without hesitation, without suspicion, without conditions. That trust became the foundation of everything that followed. There were moments, small ones, that I ignored because they didn't fit the narrative I had built, glances that lingered a second too long, inside jokes that felt too intimate, conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room, but I brushed them off. I didn't want to be the man who saw danger everywhere. I believed betrayal came from outsiders, from strangers, from temptation. I never imagined it could come from someone already inside the circle. This is the part people don't talk about enough. Betrayal doesn't always kick the door down. Sometimes it sits quietly on the couch, laughs with you, and listens to your problems. If you're re-listening to this, and you've ever trusted someone close to your relationship without a second thought, I want you to pay attention. Not because I want to make you paranoid, but because blind trust has a cost when it is misplaced. And if stories like this matter too, or real stories, told slowly, honestly, without shortcuts supporting true life, Taylor's helps give these experiences a voice, because silence is where betrayal survives. This was only the beginning. The line didn't get crossed all at once. It blurred first. At first, the change was so subtle that I didn't even recognize it as a change. That's the dangerous part. Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed overnight. Things didn't suddenly feel wrong. They just shifted. My girlfriend and I were still together. We still talked. We still laughed. We still shared moments. From the outside, everything looked normal, healthy, even. But underneath that surface, something was quietly rearranging itself. Her best friend started becoming the first person she turned to for everything. When something good happened, she told her first. When something bad happened, She called her first when she felt confused, overwhelmed, emotional. Insecure, her best friend was always the one she leaned on. I noticed it, but I didn't challenge it. I told myself it was natural, that best friends are supposed to be there like that I didn't need to compete for emotional space. Low wasn't about possession. And I truly believed that. But slowly, I realized that the conversations my girlfriend used to have with me, the deep ones, the vulnerable ones, were becoming shorter, less detailed, less urgent. Not gone, just diluted. She would say things like, "I already talked to her about it," or "She knows how I feel," or "We figured it out earlier." At first, I didn't mind. I even felt relieved sometimes, like the pressure was off me to always have the right answers. Like I wasn't alone in supporting her, but over time, it started to feel different. I began to feel like I was being informed instead of involved. I wasn't part of the process anymore, was hearing the conclusion. There were moments when I would try to talk to her about something important, something emotional, and I could feel that she was already finished with the conversation. Not because she didn't care, but because she had already processed it with someone else. That realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in quietly, in small moments I couldn't fully explain, like when we would argue, and she would repeat phrases that didn't sound like her. Phrases that felt rehearsed, polished, as if she had already walked through the argument with someone else before having it with me, or when she would suddenly be very sure about something she had been unsure about beforehand. When I asked why, she'd say, "I talked to her, and she helped me see things clearly." That sentence started appearing more and more. She helped me see things clearly. At the time, I didn't realize what that meant. I thought it meant support, perspective, care. Now I understand it meant influence. There were nights when my girlfriend would sit next to me on the couch, phone in and smiling softly at messages I couldn't see. When I asked who she was texting, the answer was always the same: her. Always her. I never checked the messages, never asked what they talked about, never questioned the tone. I didn't want to invade her privacy. I didn't want to become suspicious over nothing, but there was something unsettling about how often she needed her. Late-night calls that lasted longer than our conversations. Long walks together that replaced time we used to spend alone. Emotional discussions that happened without me. About us. That last part mattered more than I wanted to admit. They talked about our relationship, about our problems, about my flaws, about her doubts, about our future, and I wasn't there. I trusted that her best friend had good intentions, that she wanted what was best for us, that she would protect our relationship, not position herself inside it. But there's something dangerous about letting a third person become the emotional interpreter of your relationship, because no matter how well-intentioned someone seems, they will always see the relationship from the outside, and sometimes they don't just observe the cracks, they widen them. I started noticing subtle shifts in how my girlfriend saw me. Things she never complained about before suddenly became issues. Small habits became patterns. Minor disagreements became red flags. And every time I asked where this was coming from, the answer was always indirect. I've just been thinking a lot. I've had time to reflect. I've realized some things. What it didn't tease about. What I should have heard was that someone else was helping her frame those thoughts. The emotional hierarchy had changed. Without realizing it, I was no longer the person she processed life with. I was the subject being processed, and her best friend had taken my place without ever crossing a line that was obvious enough to confront. That's the most unsettling part of emotional betrayal. There's no clear moment where you can point and say, "This is where it became wrong." It just slowly becomes something you feel, but can't prove. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels familiar, trust that feeling. Not to accuse but to observe. Emotional displacement doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers, and if you appreciate stories that take the time to unpack these moments, the ones that are easy to dismiss but impossible to forget, supporting True Life Tales helps keep these stories honest and unfiltered. Because what happened next wasn't sudden, it was inevitable. There's a point in every story like this where denial stops working. Not because you suddenly have proof, but because your mind runs out of excuses. You reach a moment where the discomfort becomes louder than your desire to keep the peace. For me, that moment didn't arrive dramatically. It came quietly during a perfectly normal day. No argument, no discovery. Just a feeling that settled into my chest and refused to leave. I started noticing how often her best friend was present, even when she wasn't physically there. If my girlfriend and I were together, her phone was still part of the room, vibrating, lighting up, pulling her attention away, and every time it was her. She would read messages and smile softly in a way that felt intimate, not flirtatious but familiar, comfortable, like the smile you give someone who knows you deeply. That smile used to be for me. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to project insecurity onto something that could still be innocent. But when she noticed something, you can't unnotice it. I began to feel like a guest in my own relationship. Conversations between us started to feel filtered, edited, as if I was only being given the version that had already been approved somewhere else. She wasn't hiding things exactly, but she wasn't fully sharing them either. There was a distance that didn't look like distance, and that's the most confusing kind. Then there were the moments that felt small on the surface, but heavy underneath, like the way her best friend would look at me sometimes. Not hostile, not jealous, just observant, as if she were evaluating me, measuring me, weighing me against something I didn't know existed, or the way she would casually bring up things about our relationship that my girlfriend had never mentioned to me. She told me, "You've been feeling distant," she said. "You've been stressed lately." She mentioned you've been unsure about things. Things I had never said, things that had been interpreted, translated, I started to realize that my version of the relationship and her version were no longer the same, and her version was being shaped somewhere else. The worst part wasn't suspicion, it was helplessness. Because what do you confront when nothing technically wrong has happened yet? There was no cheating, no physical intimacy, no clear boundary crossed. Just a slow replacement of emotional priority. I tried to bring it up gently, not accusing, just curious. I told her I felt a little disconnected lately, that I missed how close we used to be, that sometimes it felt like she was already emotionally full before we even talked. She listened, nodded, said she understood. And then she said something that changed everything. "I think you're overthinking it. She just understands me really well." That sentence echoed in my head for days. She understands me really well. I wanted to ask, better than me, but I didn't. I wanted to ask, why does she need to, but I didn't. Instead, I swallowed the discomfort and told myself I was being unfair, that love meant trusting even when it felt uncomfortable. But trust, without boundaries, is not love, it's exposure. I started noticing how often decisions that affected us were already decided before we talked. How often compromises leaned in one direction. How often my concerns were softened, reframed, or dismissed as emotional reactions. It felt like there was a committee deciding the direction of my relationship, and I was only the one with the most influence. And then came the moment that made everything click. We were all together one evening, sitting in the same room, talking casually, laughing, and at one point, my girlfriend and her best friend exchanged a look. Just a look. Quick. Subtle. But I saw it. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sexual. It was something else. Shared knowledge, the kind that comes from conversations you weren't part of. And in that moment, I felt something break inside me, not loudly, but completely. I realized I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't insecure. I wasn't threatened by friendship. I was being emotionally sidelined. That realization didn't make me angry at first. It made me sad, deeply sad, because I understood then that even if nothing wrong had happened yet, something essential had already been lost. I wasn't the person she turned to first anymore. And once that changes, everything else follows. If you're re-listening to this and you've ever felt slowly replaced rather than suddenly betrayed, I need you to hear this. Your experience is real. Emotional displacement hurts because it happens in silence. And stories like this matter because so many people feel this pain but don't know how to name it. That sy true life tales exist to give language to what people feel, but can't explain. Because what happened next wasn't subtle at all. It was the moment the truth finally surfaced. There are moments in life when everything you've been trying not to see suddenly lines up, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a quiet, devastating clarity. Every strange feeling, every doubt you pushed away, every moment you told yourself you were overthinking, they all connect. For me, that moment came on an ordinary night. No arguments, no raised voices, no tension in the air. Hus routine, the kind of routine that makes you feel safe enough to stop guarding your thoughts. My girlfriend told me she was going out for a bit. Nothing unusual. She said she needed to clear her head, talk things out with her best friend. I nodded, told her to take her time, told her to be safe. That's the thing about trust. It makes you polite even when you're being left behind. I stayed home that night, trying to distract myself, watching something I wasn't really watching, scrolling through my phone without reading anything, waiting without knowing I was waiting. Hours passed. She didn't text, didn't call, and I told myself not to think about it, not to track time, not to but then her best friend's name appeared on my phone. Not a message. Miseth Kal. That single detail changed everything. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My heart started beating faster, not out of panic, but out of recognition. Like my body knew something my mind was still catching up to. Why would her best friend call me and not leave a message? I didn't call back immediately. I waited. Told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe she needed to reach my girlfriend and couldn't. Maybe she dialed the wrong number. Maybe then another call came in. This time, she left a voicemail. Her voice sounded different. Careful. Controlled. Too careful. She said my name. Paused. Then said she thought I should know something. That said didn't know how to say it. That she was sorry. Those words hit harder than any accusation ever could. I called back immediately. She answered quickly, like she'd been waiting, and then the truth started to surface, not all at once, but in pieces, fragmented, hesitant, wrapped in justification and regret. She told me that my girlfriend had been leaning on her more than usual, that things had become confusing, that lines had blurred, that feelings had developed without intention. I remember holding the phone and staring at the wall, trying to keep my breathing steady. Feelings, not a mistake. Not a moment, not an accident. Feelings. She tried to explain that nothing physical had happened at first, that it started emotionally, conversations that went too deep, support that became dependence, intimacy disguised as understanding. And then she said the part that shattered everything I still wanted to believe. She said it didn't feel like cheating at first, because it felt natural. That sentence destroyed me. Natural. As if my absence from that emotional space had been inevitable, as if I had slowly faded without realizing it. I asked her how long. She hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any number could. Weeks. Months. Conversations I wasn't part of. Moments I wasn't aware of. Emotional exchanges that should have belonged to me. I hung up the phone and sat there in silence. I didn't cry right away. I didn't shout. I didn't feel anger. I felt hollow, like something essential had been removed without anesthesia. When my girlfriend came home later that night, she knew immediately that something had changed. Not because I confronted her, but because I was calm in a way she had never seen before. That calm wasn't peace. It was acceptance. I told her I knew. Not everything. Just enough. She tried to explain. To minimize, to rationalize. She said it wasn't planned, that it happened slowly, that she never meant to hurt me. But betrayal doesn't require intention. It only requires permission. She cried. She apologized. She said she was confused. That said didn't want to lose me. That said Eden, T. One to lose her best friend either. And in that moment, I realized something devastating. I had already been lost. Because when someone allows a third person to become the emotional center of their life, the relationship is already broken long before anything physical happens. The worst part wasn't knowing she chose someone else emotionally. It was knowing she never chose to stop. If you're re-listening to this, and you've ever been told that something just happened, understand this. Nothing just happens without repeated choices. And stories like this matter because emotional betrayal is often minimized, dismissed, or misunderstood. That's why True Life Tales tells them in full, not just the shocking moments, but the quiet ones that hurt the most. Because what came next wasn't just about confrontation. It was about realization. And that realization forced me to make the hardest decision of my life. There's a strange moment after the truth comes out where time seems to slow down. Not because everything stops, but because nothing feels urgent anymore. The worst has already happened. What comes next is quieter but heavier. After that night, nothing felt the same. Not the apartment, not the silence, not even my own thoughts. Everything felt rearranged, like I had woken up in a life that looked familiar but no longer belonged to me. We talked. Of course, we talked. Long conversations that went nowhere. Conversations filled with apologies, explanations, tears, and promises that came too late. She told me she never meant for it to happen, that she didn't plan it, that it started as support, then comfort, then something she didn't know how to stop. She said she felt guilty, confused, torn. She said she loved me, and I believed that she believed it. But love without loyalty is just attachment, and attachment without respect becomes harm. What broke me wasn't just what she did. It was the realization that at no point did she choose to protect our relationship. Not when the emotional bond deepened. Not when the lines blurred. Not when she realized feelings were developing. She noticed it long before I did. And she stayed. I asked her why she didn't come to me when she first felt something was wrong. Why she didn't create distance. Why she didn't set boundaries. She didn't have a clear answer. And that answer was enough. Because when someone can't explain why they didn't stop, it means stopping was never the priority. The hardest part was understanding that I wasn't betrayed in a moment. I was betrayed over time. Every conversation she had instead of coming to me, every late-night call that replaced our talks, every decision influenced by someone outside the relationship, every time she chose comfort over honesty, I realized something painful but important. I wasn't losing her in that moment. I had already lost her weeks ago. I just didn't know it yet. The idea of staying crossed my mind, not because I believed it would work, but because leaving meant grief. Staying meant familiarity, and familiarity can feel safer than starting over, even when it hurts. But then I imagined what staying would look like. I imagined questioning every interaction, wondering every time she picked up her phone, measuring my worth against someone who never should have been in that position, living with the constant awareness that emotional loyalty had already been broken once, and I knew I couldn't do it. Trust doesn't regenerate just because someone says sorry. It regenerates when someone chooses you before the betrayal happens. So I told her I was leaving. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just firmly. She cried harder then. Said she would cut contact. Said she would do anything. Said she couldn't imagine her life without me. But I had already imagined mine without her. And it was painful but clear. I told her something that surprised even me when I said it. I don't hate you, but I can't stay where I was, slowly being replaced. That sentence carried everything I felt. I didn't walk away because I was strong. I walked away because staying would have broken me in ways I might not recover from. The weeks after were brutal. Silence is loud when you're used to sharing life with someone. I questioned myself constantly. Wondered if I was too harsh, too proud, too quick to leave. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of the truth. She didn't just choose someone else emotionally. She chose to keep choosing them, and I deserved to be chosen without competition. Healing didn't happen fast. There were nights I replayed everything. Conversations I wished I'd had. Signs I wished I'd noticed sooner. Moments I wondered if I could have done something differently. But overtime clarity replaced confusion. I learned that trust is not about giving access, it's about protecting what matters, that boundaries are not control theirs, and that love should never require you to shrink while someone else grows closer to the person you're supposed to be closest to. If you're re-listening to this and you're in a situation where a best friend feels more involved than they should be, trust what your body is telling you. Emotional betrayal often hides behind good intentions. And if you've already lived this story, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not weak for trusting. You are not foolish for believing. You are not broken for walking away. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave a relationship that already left you emotionally. This is why True Life Tales exists, to tell these stories fully, to give voice to experiences people feel but struggle to explain, to remind you that choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. And if this story resonated, supporting True Life Tales helps ensure that no one has to feel alone while carrying this kind of pain, because betrayal thrives in silence, and healing begins when the truth is finally spoken.